let's have a clink. It might not be pint pots.
Cheers.
Yeah, hot water and tea. Well, it's my great pleasure to be here with a very good friend of mine, Alistair Russell.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing was, I mean, we talked about this before something happened, which I can't remember what it was, but somehow the world came to a standstill.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So it's great to be here now,
Uh-huh.
even if it has been with like loads of car wrecks and police and fire and ambulance. It's like on the road.
On your way here
On
today.
the way here, that's it, yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. Oh, I'm very good at driving. In the mid-70s, I remember being in Germany and some of the green rooms, the term I use very loosely.
Cupboards, you mean?
Cupboards, yeah, cupboards. They'd always be scratched on the wall. I think it was something like Vergiss nicht. Was it Teesside Connection?
Cleveland Connection.
Cleveland Connection,
Yes.
that's it, yeah. And do you know what? So that's like 50 years ago, and I still remember it.
Yes, well, that was Sandy who did those graffitis, not me. I'm much too public spirited for that kind of thing.
They were on toilet walls, by the way.
Yeah, we used to, before we ever, any of us ever did music for a career, I was teaching for a while. I first qualified as a linguist to do interpreting and translating, but by devious paths ended up teaching, and along with my teenage folk guru Sandy Still from Stockton-on-Tees, and Pete Moore, another Teessider who was heavily into folk music, and we used to just go to Germany for a holiday, but with some gigs thrown in, and of course lads being lads, drink would get taken, and once in a while a little bit of graffiti would go up on a wall.
I don't think anybody minded.
Oh no!
I mean,
In fact, it was
it was-
customary
yeah.
in those kinds of environments. Yes.
But we went round, and that would be about 75-ish,
Yeah.
and they kept cropping up on the wall. I was thinking, like, who is this Cleveland Connection?
Yes.
Or as I remember it, as Teesside Connection.
Yeah, yeah.
But I still think, like, you know, over the annals of time that I remembered it.
Yes.
So that was quite, I mean, it was quite unusual to be going over and playing music in Germany at that time.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
adventurous.
Well, it tied in with me language studies because I had a fantastic good fortune while I was still studying. I was working in Munich as a industrial translator. This was part of our university placement, and
Can you guess which language it was? That he was
and anyway, I was in this civil engineering firm translating documents for these massive projects. It just gave me an insight into business that was enough to tell me never go into business. Because I spent 6 months translating a tender for the bridge over the Golden Horn in Ankara, the suspension bridge,
Right.
and another one for this the world's biggest water tower in Riyadh, and the company never got the job.
right.
So all those engineers put all that work in doing these tenders
Yes.
that were that thick,
Yeah.
in excruciating detail if you're trying to translate them,
Of course.
and never got the gig, you know. So anyway,
But that's the way that it's always been. That people put in tenders. Adds a whole new meaning to the word.
Yeah.
Here's the tender coming. You know.
Well then, pressed me for knowledge, that's for sure. Anyway, I was hitchhiking. In fact, this ties in with some of the other videos you've done talking about hitchhiking. I would escape from the office on a Friday and hitchhike back along to Stuttgart, which was where I had already made some friends in the music world, and with them I would go and do gigs on a weekend, and that then developed slowly into these trips. Once I moved back to Britain, developed slowly into these trips where we would go away for a couple of weeks at a time over Easter, and in the end we were taking a mini bus and taking loads of pals and going camping in the snow in Strasbourg, and all these things, as well as doing doing the music. So it was a fascinating time for me. And yes, I suppose we were amongst the first of the Celtic folkies, if you
Right,
want to
yes.
put a name on it, to do those tours in Germany. And of course, Germany became an absolute hotbed for Scottish and Irish music, and,
That's right,
and
yeah.
still is. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was quite unusual because you'd wind up meeting people who would sort of talk to you, go, hell no, Jesus, no, how you doing? How's things with you, though? You're right.
Yeah, they'd learn their
yeah.
English in Ennisor and places like that.
Yeah. They say, you'd say to them, like, where are you from? Jesus, no, I'm from Dusseldorf. You know, oh no, people who like, you know, talk like Billy Connolly, but they call themselves kind of like Dirk or something like that.
Yeah. In fact, there's a guy on online these days continuing that tradition. He's called Basil Wolfrine.
I've seen him.
Yes.
He goes around in
the full regalia.
Like with a ski and do dropping from his ears and stuff like this. Yeah.
And he does online videos of Scottishness in the middle of Germany.
Which was great. Which was great for the likes of us, you know. But I mean, let's go back a bit, because you didn't accidentally wind up in Germany. I mean, and you didn't accidentally wind up being good enough to play like gigs there. So what were your earlier memories of playing?
Well, this is a good point in this discussion to mention that I'm really essentially quite lazy where music is concerned, and especially where practicing my instruments is concerned.
Right.
However, I did realise fairly early on when I was a teenager that I could sing a bit, and so while I was at school, I hooked up with a guy called George Reed, who had a guitar. That he was so proud that he got this guitar. It cost him £20.
My
which
God!
was really
It's like, what?
And he left the price tag on. to show everyone. And anyway,
this ain't no cheap guitar.
No. I used to go around to his house and we would sing Bob Dylan songs and what have you. And then some other guys in our school who were much more well versed. They were from a Scottish ancestry family, just like me. They took me under their wing, and they could already play loads of instruments, and they had all the records in their collection, the early Topic records and stuff like that. So that was Sandy and Robert Still and Ian Stansfield, and we had in those days, no matter what if you did folk music, your group name had to have something to do with alcohol. So, but there was all the good names had been taken. So, but their name was Still, so we became the Distillers. So
get in. Yeah. I was thinking like the only thing that was left was like the milk stout ramblers.
Anyway, the other thing you could call yourself was after a trade. So our heroes were the Teesside Fettlers.
Right.
And we used to go around doing supports for them, and we were still just at school at the time. So I was a singer, and they played various guitars, whistles, banjos, mandolins, and brilliant guys for playing. And me being the lazy git that I was happy just to sing. And
you know, when you wind up saying like lazy, you know, like you did like so much practice, like all of the different festivals that would bump into each other, like playing in the sessions.
Oh well, you don't call that practice though. That's fun, and it does come with time. Yes, I mean, facility on the guitar did come eventually, but I started very late. After I was pretty much dedicated to me language studies at the time, and so I didn't pick up the guitar till I'd finished all that. We were all a little bit on the obsessive side in this music game, I think, and so my thing was get the language studies out the way, and then I can focus on music. So I bought a guitar, found a guy with a lot of patience in Germany, went to live in there. This is postgraduate area. Went to live with a couple of guys in a farmhouse in the countryside, like you were supposed to do.
Is this I've read this bit in your book. Yeah, when you were talking, like you thought, oh yes, I can speak German.
Yes.
And then you found out like there's a lot more to it than.
Well, it's all about people, and if you don't have that curiosity about people, there's no point you travelling anywhere. I was just thinking about it today. There's people go on these like Norwegian cruises, for example, and they see all these fabulous fjords and amazing sights and the Northern Lights and what have you. But just to do that to look at it, that's only half the picture.
Yeah.
The other side of it is get right in there with the locals and of course doing gigs and having to deal with promoters, audiences and so on. That is the way.
Did you learn how to say, like, give me the money, sort of fairly early on?
Once that happened, that we had to take a guy around the back of the theatre and
persuade him.
and show him he had to show us what was in his pockets. Anyway.
I think that's a totally different website.
Right.
What's in your pockets, Klaus?
So it really, at that point in time, before I decided that music could be a career, it was an inroad into all these different places where I could meet interesting people and just enjoy life, basically. Yeah.
It is interesting when you wind up saying you've got to go and live there, and just like looking off the side of a boat at a magnificent waterfall or a fjord or a glacier isn't quite the same as like having to live there.
Yeah, well, I loved my time. I mean, I never actually lived in France, although I studied French. I did do a placement in France at university, but I never quite took to it linguistically. But the German language just clicked with me. It seemed like natural, and so I ended up living there with these other two guys, both musicians. They were both teachers, and I just took any job I could get, and an odd job in gardening and terrible jobs where you had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Oh dear me!
Yeah, I cleaned offices.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
I didn't know you. Had you actually lived abroad working there?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, we've met people who've said, "Oh, where were you yesterday? Oh, I was in Brazil." Where are you going tomorrow? I'm going to be in Ecuador. And you kind of think, no, so you do like a country in 6 hours.
Yes.
It's not quite the same. I mean, so there you were studying guitar, you were singing with a band, and then I think we bumped into each other at folk festivals and sessions.
Probably Cleethorpes. I
was going to say Grimsby, Cleethorpes, Leeds.
Stainsby, I can remember one. I think. Did you ever go to Stainsby?
Yeah.
Those were that was out in Redcar. Those were the festivals where, apart from the shows that were put on for the paying audience, there was always a healthy contingent of young bucks in the pub who probably never. Well, it took me years before never bought a ticket. We just used to sit there and play all day and all night long.
That's right.
And that was and I have to hand it to not only the fellow musicians like yourself in the pub scene at festivals at that point, but also the musicians in. You were talking with Rob about Leeds and how important it was, the Irish scene in Leeds. Even before I got into that Leeds thing, I was going to Sheffield just by serendipity through having a friend there. Got right in on the ground floor of the local Irish scene in Sheffield, and I hadn't yet got the insight into the structure of this Irish music.
Right.
I was making loads of mistakes on the guitar, and these lovely people, you could...
probably be the age that we are now.
Exactly, you could sense that they're going, oh, bloody hell, here's another one. But they would tolerate the learning process that you were going through and make you welcome.
And kind of a guitar was like not a usual instrument. I mean, they were in the show bands.
Yes.
Where the show bands would be doing tie a yellow ribbon round the organ tree. And then they play the most astonishing jigs, reels, and everybody go, Jesus, no, we don't want that. We want the country western.
Well, I subsequently, when I spent a lot of time in Ireland, ended up mixing with musicians who crossed over between those genres.
Uh-huh.
One guy, John Campbell, used to play with Big Tom and the Mainliners.
Oh yeah.
One night.
We did Tralee Festival with them.
Yeah, there you go. And the next night he'd be on the tenor banjo with a really traditional outfit, you know.
Like Horslips as well.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
there's a
okay.
Middlesbrough connection for you as well.
In what way?
Charles O'Connor, the fiddler in Horslips.
All right.
He's from Middlesbrough.
Is he really? Oh,
Yeah.
I never knew.
Yeah. And
I never knew.
well, he's been living in Whitby ever since the
Oh.
end of Horslips. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
But I mean, and then I mean, I would have seen you like across a crowded session,
Ah,
and I was always astonished at the fact that you could always follow the tunes, and no matter where we went, and to me it seemed like some kind of magic. I mean, as like a tunes player, you never think about chordal structure. You're just thinking about the tune itself.
well, funnily enough, I went on many years later to do a very basic introduction to guitar accompaniment
That's right.
DVD for Scottish and Irish music, and the point that needs making, without getting too technical about it, is that these dance tunes from Scotland and Ireland, Brittany, wherever, it's all about the melody. So, in other words, whereas a blues player might have a chord sequence and the real musical stars will improvise over the top of the chord sequence, with Irish and Scottish music, it's exactly the other way around. The melody dictates the accompaniment. Just because a tune is in D doesn't mean it's going to go that way around the chords.
Yeah.
And so
If only it was that simple.
Yeah, exactly. And I began to realise that if you do enough of this, and there's no substitute but to sit in the session with other players and do loads of it, sooner or later you get an instinct in, even if you've not heard the tune before, you'll have a feeling for which way it's gonna go.
Or you'll have made that mistake in a similar kind of tune, and you found the chord.
All right, I'll not go that way again.
Two bars before the end of the tune.
Yeah.
That's what it should have been played.
Yeah. Hellish. I hate that.
Oh well, I won't play you any of my tunes then.
No, but I always end up, if I'm with a bunch of players and they've got something new I've not heard before, and if I finally latch onto it third time around, at the end I'll always say, "Oh, lads, I'm sorry it took me three goes to get there."
No, I think that's like a badge of acceptance. Yeah. So like fooled the guitar player. Your material. I mean, I first saw you as a solo player. I mean, you were kind of one of the main singers in and around Teesside at that time.
Yes.
Has always had a leaning towards Scottish music.
Yes.
Why in particular?
Well, I wouldn't say I've got any nationalistic urges in any direction. However, culturally, I'm 100% Scottish. I'm the only member of my family who actually lives in England now that my parents are dead. My parents were from Coatbridge near Glasgow, and they came to Newcastle on Tyne when before I was born, and they for work, looking for work, and they stayed in England, but obviously we were up and down the road to Scotland to the family all the time. But I've kept in loose contact with all the other Scottish members of the family, but very loose, because I've made my life in England, and it's a weird thing. It's a bit of a paradox, really. You play Scottish and Irish music for your career, but and when you go to Scotland, I was just there last weekend in Edinburgh playing with some absolutely fantastic musicians that I've known for 40 or more years. You say to yourself, well, why don't I just go live up there? And the answer is life happens. You get married, or your partner gets a job or whatever, and also in terms of opportunity, at that time the English folk club scene was massive, and you could get lots of gigs, and whereas the Scottish folk club scene, because of the smaller population, it was brilliant, but it was limited. You couldn't make a living just in Scotland, and and that notion that you're taking a music out of its home and you're playing it somewhere else, in this case England, it opens your mind to the possibility that you could take it elsewhere, which is what we've already talked about, taking it to Germany. And the one thing I love about Scottish and Irish music is there are many things, but it like you could argue that it's the basis of rock and roll, blah blah blah. But the fact is, it's a really worldwide happy coincidence that nearly everybody you play to, no matter where it is, can cotton on to what you're doing. They like the rhythm, they like the melodies, they like to get up and dance, they like to sing along. And not that you would choose that music for purely commercial reasons, but if you want to make a living at playing music, it's great music to play.
Yeah, you want to cheer people up.
Yes.
And give them something to dance to.
Yes,
well.
yes.
I think that's the thing that happened with Jiggy Jig. Do you remember when that
East
came
of
out?
Eden,
East of Eden, when that came out, there was this, nobody really knew what it was. They had like a rough idea in the middle of a disco. Ask your grandparents. In the middle of a disco, and everybody suddenly started like doing the Highland flings, or fling-esques. They could best be described as.
Yeah, well, and then fast track 30, 40 years forward, and you get to a situation where Riverdance and Lord of the Dance and all these things like that are just so accepted that everybody worldwide can recognise Irish and Scottish rhythms and tunes, and it's absolutely wonderful how the inherent qualities of that music have allowed it to just latch on to everybody's consciousness.
It's hard to remember what it was like pre-Riverdance. I mean, we would go to like Flowers and would start playing in pubs. And the Irish people in the pubs would be kind of going, well, why are you playing that country music? Not meaning country and western.
You mean that
old country kind of music.
Yes.
People would like it, you know, but I think there's been an explosion since.
Yes, the respect came back in the general Irish and Scottish population for their own music, and it's never gone away. And so now there's absolutely no stigma in Ireland or Scotland to admit that you're into traditional music, whereas in England...
Right, I was going to ask you, why do you think there is more interest in folk music in places like Scotland and Ireland? I mean, in England, you almost have to whisper it behind your hand that you like folk music.
Well, I think there's two strands to that. And let's look on a practical level in the fact that both in Scotland and Ireland, there have been organisations at extreme grassroots level who have encouraged young kids to play music, and, they carry on doing that. That's the practical side of it. But
I've never thought of that.
No,
it never really occurred to us that would be like a big factor in it being sort of promoted and an acceptable activity, a leisure activity.
As cool as rock and roll. But the other thing is emotionally, and that what I referred to a few minutes ago, where there's just this direct contact between the player or the singer and the member of the public who just gets it like that, and that now there's some branches of English music that can do that. You know, you'll sometimes hear somebody from down the extreme West Country in a Cayley band, Dartmoor Pixie band and people like that, or up in Northumberland, starting off with the High Level Renters and all the bands that came after that, where those musics do strike a chord with the locals, but there's nothing kind of universal about that, and quite a lot of the folk music that has become popular and sold lots of albums over the years that we've been living in England doing folk music. Quite a lot of them are verging on art music in the sense that it's more of a head thing than
Right.
than a heart thing, and
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, no, absolutely not.
But it might be an explanation for why
Yeah.
it hasn't entered the
Yeah,
consciousness of the
or
general.
resonates with people.
Uh-huh.
Do you do you think it's this? It's almost like a joke, like
Oh,
the Morris
That's the
dancing.
other side of it, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I
And
mean,
people-
Hadge Cutler and the Wurzels is some people's idea of folk music, you know.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
You know, if I was Hadge Cutler, I would think of
Well,
the
it's-
Wurzels and
I think
and
Hadge
things like that.
Cutler's long past worrying about that now.
Well, I suppose, yes, yeah. And then, I mean, you'll see rock bands, and it's almost as if they're saying, like, we are doing a folk song now,
Aha.
which consists of playing rock riffs with an acoustic guitar
Yeah.
and no drums. So,
I mean, some of them pulled it off for you. You think, I mean, there's famous recordings like John Barleycorn Must Die by Traffic, where it's done with total sympathy,
yeah.
respect, and it stands up on its own as a piece of music. But that's not always the case.
I bet you can tell what the next question is going to be. It's like that people wind up treating folk music, you know, in a 20th and 21st century way, and there's a lot of people that suddenly go, well, that's not folk music because you've got like electronics and things like that. Well, we can draw a veil over that.
Yeah, with that, thankfully, that argument doesn't it never held water, and it certainly doesn't hold water now, because the bands that might have excited that or evinced that kind of response when they started, and I'm thinking particularly of our local heroes, Lindisfarne, have long since got to the point where they're a true people's band who play to all kinds of audiences, and nobody even says that you're not allowed to do that with folk music.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I wouldn't mess with them.
Yeah.
This isn't going round the back of the theatre and asking for the money. Right. Another aspect to your career is the fact that you do sound, like for festivals. Now, what I like to ask people who do sound is, how did you get into it? And was it, we need a soundsman, will the soundsman step forward and everybody step backwards faster than you?
No, I liked it. Those early bands that I had in Teesside, Distillers, Cleveland Connection, and then I played with, when I first went full-time as a musician with Tom Napper, it was always me who ran the PA system. Rudimentary though they may have been, that was a point in time when the quality of, at last there was amplification which was actually suitable for acoustic music. Right. Before that, everybody had the big blocks of flats at the side of the stage, and it was was rock and roll or nothing, you know. But all of a sudden we got equipment which was almost hi-fi in quality, and you could really go to town with getting a good acoustic sound. So I used to love doing that for my own band. And then the next step for me was that once I had been playing music for a couple of years on a professional basis, and it was going pretty well, not only with Tom Napper as a duo, but I'd started doing some solo stuff as well. I was doing all right in the sense that I didn't have to be on the dole, but then a personal friendship with a brilliant band from Glasgow called Ossian led me to get a proper job as a sound engineer. They were sick of going around all these venues playing through crappy PAs, and they decided to put the money into a good van, a good PA system, and employ a sound engineer. And
a hairdresser.
well, they still had hair at that point. So. Anyway, they took me on, even though I had no grounding in the technical side of sound engineering.
I
knew
your ears.
Well, yes, exactly. I knew what these instruments should sound like because I'd been listening to them for years, and so that is a trump card as opposed to the guy who's learned that this note has such and such a frequency. You know? Yeah, I spent a whole year on the road with them all around Europe.
I think we bumped into each other. It's probably the Malamolan.
Yes, well, that was one of those legendary
Huilas.
places that you're glad you don't have to go back to.
I loved it. I loved it.
All I can remember is the mosquito bites. The place was infested with mosquitoes.
Oh no! We never went when it was warm enough. We this was the tenet of our band. We were the ones who do it in like October, November through February.
And you have to take your bed in with you.
Yeah, and it's like minus 30, and the water frozen, the toilet doesn't work, and all the rest of it.
Oh, because the toilet was out the back there, and you slept in the roof space.
That's right.
So it's bloody freezing.
Yeah.
And then you had to walk half a mile if you wanted to wee in the night.
Yeah.
That'd be no good for me now.
Yeah. So I hadn't realised it was like as short a time as a year, because it always seemed like much longer than you were with Ossian.
No, a full year, and what happened then was I was living in Middlesbrough at the time. I was running along the street one day because I was in a hurry to get in the car and go to my dad's house. I was running along the street and I tripped on a cracked paving stone, and I totally wrecked my left ankle. And in terms of what that does for your walking capacity, it's the same as if you break your leg. In those days, they would put you in plaster and you'd be there for a long time. And
This has been a very naughty boy.
And so at that point, Ossian said, "Oh well, look, we're on a bit of a slack period right now. We'll just we'll continue without a soundman for the time being." In the end,
had you taught them everything you knew?
In terms of speaking to German concert promoters, yes.
Did you dazzle them with your technical prowess?
As the concert promoter's face would go.
Oh no, he speaks German. Sorry, I don't understand you. Yeah, I only speak a little one of English.
Anyhow, Ossian then subsequently were on and up again, and they got a different sound man, John Weatherby, who was a really close friend.
Yeah.
And John Weatherby was at that time actually I had started up playing solo, not doing sound anymore, and he was my booking agent for gigs in Scotland. And he did a great job for me, got me some lovely gigs. And so everybody, if people are watching this video who don't quite cotton on to our world of intertwined relationships in folk music, sooner or later it all comes round again, and the same people meet up with the same people again, and it's a really heartwarming experience when that happens.
It is.
And although I wasn't employed by Ossian anymore, there was no hard feelings, and in fact I was sat beside John Martin, the fiddler from Ossian, this weekend in Edinburgh, and stayed at their house, and it's just a lovely experience to catch up again after all these years.
Even if they did get an even bigger van.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, well, there was this pecking order. Like the people who had the Domobiles still, they were nowhere.
Yeah.
In fact, we bought a van off you. We bought a transit van off you.
Well, that had belonged to the Haig family. Nick Haig, who was the fiddler in Cleveland Connection, his family. He was a member of a large family, and they had bought a minibus to carry this large family around. And when it started to fall apart, they sold it to me for a pittance, and I had a lot of patching up to do.
Well, it had like a foot of filler, like around the side.
Yes, the seams were coming apart. Yeah. Let's put it that way.
We spent many a happy minute in that.
Yeah. So, but you started off this little segment talking about sound, and so I kind of left sound.
He's very good, isn't he?
I'm remembering that. Yeah. I left that behind for a while and started to play solo.
Yeah.
And I never came back to full-time sound for a long time after that. But,
Yes.
but
I think that's when we really kind of forged a friendship and got to know each other.
Well, I came at that point. I came to live in Leeds, and
That's
you
right.
put us up, and it was. I mean, we'd already met on the well-known Irish scene in Leeds, but then, yes, that was the era when we went on that mad tour, the
Oh yes, up to Scotland.
the Celtic Music Roadshow,
Yeah.
with your band Iona and Tom McConville and Kieran Halpin, myself, and the legendary Sean Maguire
I
on
know.
the fiddle. And I mean, Sean.
Was that the one when Joe Burke was there as well?
No.
Oh right, we did another one with
All
Joe
right.
Burke, and that was that was something else.
No, that was what I remember. On that particular tour, we ended up playing various large Irish venues around the London area and meeting up with all the. But we never had anywhere to stay, and I can remember one.
How
night,
unusual!
I can remember one night walking into a flat that had been donated to us to sleep in Hendon or some such place, and you lads stayed, but I just took one look and walked out, and
I had no scruples.
I found a friend to put me up for the night. He didn't know he was my friend until then.
Come on, we've all done it. We've all done. Me and McDoonan were doing support for Bert Jansch, and they said, like, at the end of the night, here's a contract, worth as much as this, and it said like accommodation for the night. So you took us where they stored all of the fluid for bandes. Do you remember the machines?
The duplicator
duplicator fluid.
Sweet dreams.
Yeah, I know. And I just looked and I said, I'm not going to sleep in there. I mean, it was almost, inflammable in the room.
Yes.
So we're stopping people as they're going out. Can you put us up for the night? Can you put us up for the night?
Yeah.
Can you put us up for the night like this?
Yeah.
And eventually somebody on the, he was a lad, an English lad, who was working on the M25 as it was then.
Yeah.
And he put us up in the cement caravan. So all the old cement sacks, it would have been better off with the bander fluid. But the next day, our head, with the sweat, it turned into like spikes of like cement. Yeah.
And showers were for wimps.
Yeah. I know. Oh God, no. Oh no. A jump in time. I mean, I think people will know you from your association with the Battlefield Band.
That was another result of personal friendships. Sometimes I wonder, I can't say enough times. I know I can sing a song, and I know I can actually make people listen to a song, and I think that's two parts of the equation. But in terms of instrumental prowess, I've always been kind of lagging behind because I took the guitar up so late. So I've been really fortunate to not just be friends, honest, good friends with some amazing technical musicians, but also to get...
I'm astonished to hear you say this, because I think you're a great guitarist.
Well, I just play within my limitations, basically, and it has got better. But anyhow, so I would meet up with these guys like...
Do you know what? I very rarely interrupt, but I'm going to interrupt.
Yeah.
When you were on with Chris Parkinson, the last time I saw you, I was absolutely knocked sideways by both of you. I just thought, this is one of the best nights.
Oh, well, that's nice, and I do love playing with him, and actually, he's
I mean,
another
if anything, I thought he was holding you back.
He's another guy. He can play anything he wants, but he always just plays what's right and what's needed, and enough to give you space to actually enjoy each other's playing.
Right. Don't do yourself down, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
So as I brought this segment together.
Battlefield
Your
Band.
Battlefield Band, yeah.
Yes, well, I had met up with Battlefield Band many times in Glasgow, and in fact, Battlefield is the name of a place. It's a suburb of Glasgow. And when I was it's the site of the Battle of Langside. Yeah. When I was a little kid, I used to stay with my auntie in Langside, which is right next to Battlefield. So when I finally got to join a Battlefield band, I was probably the one in the band who had the longest connections with Battlefield. But they got their name because that's where Brian was living when he first started the band. Anyhow, we had bumped into each other socially, and then especially one time we were in Ireland. I'll just digress for a moment, and this is about how to absorb traditional music. I used to travel around Ireland before I was a full-time musician and I was teaching. I used to travel around Ireland with some friends from different countries around the world, Germans, Irish, New Zealanders, French. We would have a little gang of people traveling around, and basically we would play in the pubs with local musicians in an attempt to actually soak up as much of this tradition as we could, and we were always welcomed with open arms, and we would be passed down the west coast from one village to another, where Bernie on the squeeze box would phone up his mate Dennis on the fiddle and say, we've got these guys coming, give them a slot in your pub tonight. And it was just a delightful way of spending several summers in the mid-70s. And on one of those summers, we spent a week travelling around with the Battlefield band just for the crack. Well, it was just great, absolutely great. Just non-stop laughs until there was a fight one night. But we won't go into that.
We'll just gloss over that.
Yeah. Anyhow, so we were already well acquainted with one another, and I heard on the grapevine it was through. Sadly, we have one of our great friends, Kieran Halpin from RD in County Louth, who was a big part of the Leeds music scene for a while. He died a couple of years ago, but he was always on the road, always travelling, and he came back from a trip to Edinburgh one time and said to me, do you know, Jed Foley, he's quitting with the Battlefield band. And I thought, oh, I could do that. So I sent a letter in the days when
people did, yeah.
Yes, with an album, because I had brought out my first solo album to Robin Morton from Boys of the Loch, who was the manager of the Battlefield band, and said, here I am, give us a shot. And they said, all right. And so that was like a complete leap in musicianship for me, and also in the quality of the gigs we were playing. I mean, the very first gig I played with them was the Eden Court Theatre in Inverness, you know. Absolutely, I've never played anywhere like that, you know. And
people were pantomiming the place.
they were already at a point. Battlefield band had done an immense apprenticeship.
Absolutely.
Playing every folk club. In fact, it was in the Teesside area where they had first made their forays into the English folk scene. But then they'd moved their way up through little art centres, small municipal theatres, what have you. So by the time I joined them, we were playing mostly in municipal theatres, subsidised by local authorities, places like Theatre Clwyd in Mold in Wales, or what was it called, Minerva in Lowestoft, all these places like that, Worthing Pavilion, those kind of gigs were on our early Battlefield band gigs during my time in the band. But what has to be said is that the main part of our earnings didn't come from England or Wales, they came from, Scotland, brilliant. To cut a long story short, we ended up, after 13 years in the band, we were playing every big venue in Scotland and selling them out, and that was a fantastic feeling. And the music had, by that time, it really had got into the Scottish psyche. But going around the world, when I joined Battlefield band, they had already been to the USA for 7 tours, and they had lost money on every single one. And if they hadn't had the management of Robin, who had done it all before with Boys of the Loch, he had the confidence to say to them, no, you should keep up this
Yeah, you got to
lads."
keep going.
So my first tour with them in the USA, 9 weeks we were away. I kept a little log. We managed to sleep an average of 4 hours per night for 9 weeks.
Yeah.
And anyway, we made a little bit of money.
It's funny, isn't it? So they've seen the numbers in black as opposed to red.
Yeah.
It's like a huge...
We got home and we got a little handout, you know.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
this is great.
£10 for myself.
So, and then, you know, once again, once you've tipped that balance into solvency, by the time I finished my time with the Battlefield Band, we were playing all the big festivals like everybody does, Edmonton, Philadelphia and so on. But we were also doing enormous university auditoriums on the fine arts circuit where there would be maybe 3,000 people there, and one gig would pay the expenses of the whole tour.
Right.
And so it turned into a really good money-making proposition.
Yeah, but with fantastic music.
Well, it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the music.
Yeah.
And that brings me back round to what I was saying. There's something about this music, especially in America, you could argue that because Scottish and Irish music is the roots of old-timey bluegrass, Americana, country music, it all comes from Scotland and Ireland. There is a sensibility in the people for this music, and they just don't have to be told how to have a good time. You know? And the same
it's
thing.
visceral.
Yeah, I mean, there is an expatriate population.
I was going to say, you must love genealogists.
Especially, oh God. No, the funniest part was we would go to Canada, which is like New Zealand. Canada is largely composed of Scots originally, and we'd play some venue and have a bloody great night, and then we'd go to the after venue party. And what they wanted to know, these punters, was what's happening in Coronation Street.
Oh, no!
Because they were 6 months behind in Coronation Street because they hadn't started showing it on their telly. And so they're what's happened to Deirdre?
Oh, right, okay. Oh, well, I think that's hilarious.
So, yeah.
Because they kept asking us, we were playing Irish music, and say, like, which part of Ireland are you from? And I'd say South Shields. You know, and they're very disappointed.
They would be, the Americans, but the Irish wouldn't be disappointed.
No.
The Irish just love other people playing their music.
Of course.
And that's another thing that I love about the Celtic music scene, is that it's, no matter where, well, one of the very best bands playing Celtic music right now is Cara from the south of Germany. And they've got an Irishman and a Scots lassie in the band, but the rest of them are German. And they are filling big halls, and they're doing a lovely job. And they get to play at Celtic Connections, and they fill the concert hall in Glasgow. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
You know something? I've got some notes here.
Yeah.
Because I knew that would be hard pressed to find anything to talk about. There's one thing that I haven't touched on, and that's your book, which came out, was it 3 years ago?
Just after lockdown,
Just after lockdown, yeah. Always in on the crest of a slump.
Well, I don't know. How was it for you during lockdown? Did you want to play music, and did you play a lot of music? Or
no, I kind of went the other way. I'd been working up towards playing like a lot of music, and then I because I couldn't play anywhere, because I'm not really. I got sick and tired of playing in the bathroom, you know, to yourself. So I just stopped writing, and because I didn't want to be the person who was going to have a lockdown album, of which there have been a few.
Well, fair play. Some people took that opportunity to be creative. Others, like me, and sounds like you as well, to me, music is a sociable thing, and if you can't play with other people, and if you can't play to other people,
and for other people,
yeah,
I'm not playing this for me.
Yeah, then it kind of loses its meaning, and I know there's some very famous musicians who have admitted in private that they didn't pick up their instruments at all during lockdown. They're just so demoralised and disheartened, and of course the other thing was not just to get political for a moment, the government introduced a scheme of compensation for self-employed people, but the figures show that an enormous proportion of professional musicians, about a third, actually received no government funding whatsoever because they fell through the various little loopholes and cracks.
Every insurance, it does everything but insure you.
So I never got a penny, and so I was just ticking over really. I didn't want to play. Luckily we were living in Whitby at the time, and Whitby was a good place to be locked down because when you took your daily exercise, it was just inspiring to get out and see the cliffs and climb the steps and be energetic. And living in a small town there, once the tourists were away, every time you went out for a little walk during lockdown, you would only see a handful of people, but you'd know them all. And that was a really nice kind of homely, but it was only an hour a day, so what do you do with the rest of your time? And people, I've always been somebody for telling stories and funny stories along the Billy Connolly lines, but nowhere near as accomplished as what he does. Not rather than tell a joke with a punchline, you kind of try and extract the humour out of whatever situation you happen to be in. And people had often said to me, well, you got to write all this down. I thought, well, okay, I'll do that now. So I spent about 8 months writing what I hesitate to call an autobiography. It's arranged chronologically now, but I started just spontaneously writing down little stories that I'd remembered from my life as a musician and otherwise, and trying to be funny about it. And lo and behold, after 8 months, I had a book, and then I was well aware from publishing CDs and what have you that it's quite possible to self-publish a book, but I got really lucky in that Pete Hayward from the Living Tradition magazine took me on, not financially, but in terms of putting their stamp on my book as publisher, giving me the advertising exposure, and also they had all the connections for printing and what have you. And our other folk music colleague Brian Ledyard from Penistone, who's a professional photographer, he and graphic artist, he did all the layout, and so we ended up with a really nice professional product. And due to social media being really crucial during that period, all I did was I put on social media, I've got a book coming out, who wants one? And within a week or two, I had covered the total costs of producing this book. People were really, well, A, it was a justification. They obviously thought I could tell a good story, but B, they were being so supportive during that difficult period. And
I bought a lot of t-shirts.
It paid for itself, and the first print run sold out like that. And so I got some more printed, and there's a few left now, but people still buy them on gigs, and I feel proud to have done it. It's a good read.
It is a good read.
It's
a very good read.
Mainly for laughs. And but there's some sad bits in it, of course. Anyhow, people still buy it on the occasional gigs, and it was a really good morale booster for me at that point, where I thought, what's the point of being a musician if you can't be a musician? You got to think of something else. Let's do this, and thank goodness it worked out lovely.
I'm so pleased.
Thank
Thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you, Tony.
As as I expected, that whizzed by.
We could go on forever.
Yeah, we have barely scratched the surface. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much. And,
No, such a pleasure.
And also bearing in mind what I was just saying about having been back to Edinburgh this last weekend, just the fact that you've turned up today to do this, it's a nice little connection as we get older, and without getting maudlin about it, there comes a point where you think, well, maybe I won't be as mobile in a while, and maybe I won't get to meet friends,
right.
And so you should take the opportunity.
Seize every opportunity. Yeah. Well, it's like just a real pleasure to come down. I mean, I was cursing the crashes and the police and the roadblocks, but I mean that's just the way that it goes.
No, thank you very much.
I was pleased that you hadn't gone to sleep for your nap in the afternoon.
Oh, I have plenty of them.
Thanks again. That was great.
Cheers.
Right. If only I'd switched on. Great. One of the phones might have run out of. We'll just